When a cyclone tears through a coastline, the world counts the houses lost, the bridges washed away, and the boats smashed against the shore. But what about the coconut that lost its sweetness, or the disappearance of fishing grounds? These are the losses that live on years after major climatic events, but since they cannot be quantified traditionally, they remain uninsured, uncompensated, and uncounted. Now, the fund for responding to loss and damage became a headline issue at COP27, when nations finally agreed to set up a fund to help vulnerable countries recover from climate impacts. It was framed as a breakthrough, but the fund is built around physical losses. But what about non-economic loss and damage? They translate into falling incomes and rising costs. 7 years after Cyclone Fani tore through the coastal state of Orissa, CarbonCopy found a living case study of the true extent of loss and damage, which slowly builds over a long period of time. I am Shaswata, a correspondent with CarbonCopy, and welcome to episode 12 of our Big Story podcast. Fani hit Orissa in 2019, uprooted around 14 lakh coconut trees and devastated the coconut and coir industries overnight. But 7 years on, the coconut sellers are back on the road. But the coconuts are smaller and have less water. 5 sellers I spoke to said the same thing. The taste is also not as sweet as before. Now, the cyclone changed certain ecological conditions which affected the quality of the fruit. The change reduced its market value, and that reduced value has quietly dismantled livelihoods that no insurance policy has touched. Several coconut sellers told me that the native trees used to grow to 50 or 60 feet. Now they reach roughly 30 feet. The cyclone triggered a deformation process in the surviving trees and caused widespread mite infestations. The locals call it jadoo. The coconut mite spreads through the wind, and Fani's 230 km/h winds carried it across groves that had never seen it before. Yields fell by up to 60% on some farms. Farmers now pluck coconuts early before the infestation visibly worsens. What reaches the market are smaller and drier coconuts with less water. At Odisha's coconut growing hub of Sakhigopal, licensed traders have gone from 150 before Fani to 98 today. Let's see what one of them has to say.
क्या हुआ, नारियल तो पेड़ सब निकल गया साइक्लोन में, और साइज कम हो गया और जादू हो गया, और मार्केट में बहुत प्राइसेस हो गया नारियल। हाँ, तो इसी के लिए तो धंधा बहुत मंदा चल रहा है और थोड़ा कम चल रहा है। 3 साल बैठे हैं, फनी का बाद 3 साल बैठे हैं। 3 साल के बाद जो थोड़ा थोड़ा आ रहा है, तो एक एक पेड़ से 5 ठो 4 ठो 10 ठो निकल रहा है। और तो दूसरा कोई किसान जो पेड़ लगाता नहीं है, और बहुत इसी के लिए धंधा महीने में 1 गाड़ी 2 गाड़ी काम हो रहा है। और ऐसे धंधा अच्छा था, बहुत पेड़ था, बहुत माल आ रहा था, बहुत नारियल आ रहा था, और बहुत साइज माल आ रहा था, जादू नहीं था। और क्या पानी भी नारियल अच्छा आ रहा था, वेस्टेज नहीं हो रहा था। इसी धंधा अच्छा चल रहा है। 1 महीने में 10 टो 15 टो गाड़ी चल रहा था। हाँ, बाहर से बहुत आ रहा है। 75% माल आ रहा है। उड़ीसा 75% बाहर माल काम हो रहा है। केरल से काम हो रहा है, तमिलनाडु से काम हो रहा है, कांकीनाडा से काम, आंध्र प्रदेश में काम हो रहा है, संपेटा से काम हो रहा है। हाँ, 75% काम हो रहा है।
Compensation after the cyclone was rupees 1600 per uprooted tree, capped at 25 trees per farmer. But there was no compensation for the quality loss in surviving trees or the new ones which yielded less coconuts. Something similar has befallen fishing communities at Chilika Lake too. Recurrent cyclones have damaged the mouth of the lagoon, pushed sediment into fishing grounds, and altered the route of the water. There are less fish, and the fish are also harder to find.
मेरा नाम पवित्र बेर है। हमारा गांव है सनपन्न है। हम ये मच्छी पकड़ते हैं नौका से जाई। अभी से जाल से नहीं है, चिल्का से एक मच्छी भी नहीं होता है। अभी जाल पेलेगा तो ये 2 किल में मच्छी नहीं मिलेगा हमारे को। और भंगम सागर का जगह तो वो भी 10 किल 12 किल 8 किल वो मच्छी धर कर हमारा लोग को पेट पोसेगा से वो सनपन्ना में, और चिल्के से एक मच्छी भी नहीं मिलेगा। हमें जितना बार जाल पेलेगा तो एक मच्छी भी नहीं उठते। वो तो जल नहीं तो मच्छी कहाँ से आ गया।
Marine fishers now travel up to 200 kilometers to find catch that used to be 70 kilometers out. Diesel consumption has also gone up from 100 liters to 150 liters per trip. Earnings have dropped from around rupees 2000 per trip to rupees 500 now. High value species of fish like mud crab and specific mullet varieties have disappeared from the nets, replaced by smaller fish that fetch a fraction of the price. To understand why none of this is insured, I spoke to Pankaj Tomar, head of India and Southeast Asia at AXA Climate, one of the world's largest climate insurers. He started with the basics. There are two kinds of climate insurance: traditional indemnity insurance, which pays out based on actual losses suffered, and parametric insurance, which pays when a pre-agreed trigger is met, like wind speed crossing a defined threshold during a cyclone. But both share a fundamental design assumption. They respond to sudden, measurable and uncertain events. What the coconut farmers of Sakhigopal are experiencing does not fit that design. The mite infestation spread gradually over seasons. The quality of the fruit declined over the years. There was no single moment of damage to point to. For the fishers, even though they have to travel farther distances, it is not an uncertain future risk. And insurance, as Tomar put it, responds to uncertainty, not to structural certainty. Once longer travel becomes an expected operating condition rather than an unpredictable event, it falls entirely outside the scope of what insurance can cover. Then there is the question of knowledge loss. These are not economic losses in the purest sense, but they have direct economic consequences. If it is intangible, how will you price it? Tomar told me. That is the core of the problem. Insurance is a pricing mechanism. It can only cover what it can quantify. More importantly, even if someone could price these risks, the communities most exposed to them are the least able to pay the high premiums. This is not just an Orissa problem. Across the world, it is happening. Welfare-based approaches can work as partial bridges, like public health systems that formally recognize and treat climate-related impacts. These cannot replace compensation, but they can absorb some of what the market refuses to count. A deeper fix would require valuation techniques from environmental and health economics, assigning monetary figures to intangible losses so policymakers have numbers to act on. Every year, these invisible losses compound. The Loss and Damage Fund was a start, but progress is moving much slower than the rate at which losses are accumulating. Until that changes, the people of Sanpatna, Sakhigopal, and the rest of the world will keep paying a price without any proper economic protection.